Okay, I am here at the Cornelious Houghtelin Farm. I'm going to do a video series called the Cornelious Houghtelin Farm. Now, Cornelious Houghtelin was a Gettysburg man who purchased this property in the year of 1851. He was born on May the 15th, 1797. He was 65 years old at the time of the battle in 1863, and he was a farmer. And he lived here on this farm and farmhouse. The house itself was built in the year 1809 and with additions added around 1850. The barn, which sits over here to the right of the house, was built in the year 1820. So both the house and the barn are Civil War structures. Now, he lived here with his wife Anna and their children. Now, Cornelius was a member of the male fraternity organizations, the Freemasons, and that's going to play a very important role in the story of him here at Gettysburg and during the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, the Freemasons' purpose was to do good works, to help their fellow man, and to become a better man to both their family and their community. Now, as he progressed along the 3 degrees of Freemasonry, which was his entered apprentice, his fellow craft and master mason degree, he learned the role of a Freemason. Now, Cornelius would die on April the 9th, 1865, here in his home around 11 o'clock in the morning. And later on in a later video, we're going to show you the parlor where he died in his bedroom, and his body was taken downstairs to the parlor where it was visited during his funeral. That day, April 9th, 1865, is also the same day that General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Appomattox, Virginia. Now, his cause of death was disease of the brain, which was caused by a stroke. He is buried today in Section G, Lot 317 in Grave 4 of the Evergreen Cemetery, over where the Evergreen Gatehouse is at. In our next set of videos, we're going to talk a little bit about the battle that took place here on his farm, which is very little known about and quite fascinating. This has been the Cornelious Houghtelin Farm here on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. This Houghtelin Farm. This is going to be the Cornelious Houghtelin Farm, Part 2, here on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. And we're going to talk about the action here around the Houghtelin Farm. Now, when people look or think about the Battle of Gettysburg and how it ended, the first thing that comes to mind is the glorious Pickett's charge. That's the glorious and the romantic side of the battle. Those Virginians under Major General George Pickett charging across the field, being repulsed and then driven back, and then finally escaping here on July 4th, 1863, headed back across the Potomac into the safety of Virginia. And to most people, that's how the battle ends. However, there is a little known action that took place here on this farm on July 3rd, 1863, between the hours of 2 and 9:30 p.m. Now, this action was led by Brigadier General Wesley Merritt. Now, Wesley Merritt was the commander of the Reserve Brigade, 1st Division of Cavalry Corps under the Army of Potomac. He saw no action on the 1st or the 2nd. His reserve brigade guarded the lines of communications on the morning of July 3rd. However, he would participate in the assault that was ordered by his division commander, Brigadier General Judson Kilpatrick, on the Confederate right flank, which was during and following Pickett's charge. Now, his fellow general, Elon J. Kilpatrick, was killed during the futile assault on the infantry troops on July 3rd, 1863. Now, members of his brigade consisted of the 1st and 2nd U.S. Cavalry, which were also known as the Dragoons, the 6th Pennsylvania Russia's Lancers, the 5th U.S. Cavalry, and these men all fought here on this very farm, beginning at 11 in the morning, where Merritt, coming from the south in the direction, began to deploy his troops. Now, when they got to this area, the houghtelin farm, on July 3rd, 1863, around 2 p.m., the first fired shot was by Graham's artillery, who was being led by Captain William Montrose Graham, who fired the first shots here at 2 p.m. on July 3rd, 1863. And just over here is William Graham's Battery K monument on what we call South Cavalry Field today. The troops advanced here from the south across this farm around 2 p.m. Now, the 5th U.S. was along the Emmitsburg Road over here in the distance. Right about where I'm standing right now is the 2nd U.S. Cavalry, and they would skirt across and by the Cornelius houghtelin farm and barn here. On their right was the 1st U.S., which went on the other side of the barn over here, and then would skirt across the house back here toward the Emmitsburg Road. Now, this was all around 2:30 on July 3rd, 1863. The 6th Pennsylvania, also known as Rush's Lancers, would come across this field right here. They would dismount and then begin to head up this way. Now, all these troops headed northbound along the Emmitsburg Road when they were spotted by the skirmishers of John L. Black's 1st North Carolina Cavalry. Now, John L. Black, seeing this, set out a skirmish line with his troops, and for several hours, as Pickett's charge was ending, okay, this small battle went on the northbound on the Emmitsburg Road toward the Alexander Curran's house, and its attempt was to turn the right flank of the Confederate Army. Now, the very right of the army was up near where today Confederate Avenue is, or just beyond the Alexander Curran's farm. On July 2nd, 1863, something that happened here we will talk about on our next video, and we'll also talk about the remainder of the battle on July 3rd, 1863. This has been the Cornelius houghtelin Farm Part 2 on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Today we're going to talk about an action that happened here on July 2nd. Cornelius houghtelin, a 65-year-old man, left his farm and wandered on this road out toward the Emmitsburg Road with a rifle in his hand. Out there, he was actually captured by Confederate forces, being one of the only Gettysburg civilians to be captured during the Battle of Gettysburg. He was taken to a headquarters where a major was to interview him, since he was caught with a weapon and not in a military uniform. Now, of course, the punishment for that could be bushwhacking, which would carry the penalty of death. However, this Confederate major noticed that Cornelius was wearing a ring that marked him as a Freemason, and that major was also a Freemason. So Cornelius houghtelin was set free and brought back to his farm here on July 2nd. Now, on July 3rd, we talked about Colonel John L. Black's skirmishers spotting these troops crossing the field as they're headed northbound. Now, Black goes back to Anderson's brigade and asks for reinforcements, and he has sent the 8th, 7th, and 59th Georgia. Now, those infantry regiments who had been engaged on July 2nd, 1863, in and around the wheat field, began to wheel into this direction southbound, and they clashed with the troops that had passed the Cornelius farm. They clashed with them at the Alexander Curran's farm. And of course, this was Confederate infantry, and they were able to hold back the attack on the right flank of the Confederate Army here very late in the evening, around 7:30 to 8 o'clock on July 3rd, 1863. And as those Confederate infantry reinforced John L. Black's skirmishers, they also were being fired on by Confederate batteries from Riley's battery, from Hart's battery, and then to the right over here, Bachman's battery, who was also engaged with Elon J. Farnsworth. The support from Graham's battery, again at the top of the hill, was all that these federal troops had. And eventually, the federal troops were pushed back here to this farm and stayed here the night of the 3rd into the 4th. Now, the battle on the 3rd ended at 9:30 at night when it got dark and the rains began to come. This is probably the final and unknown action of Gettysburg here on the Cornelius houghtelin farm and along the Emmitsburg Road. The attempt to turn the right flank of the Confederate Army from 2 p.m. till 9:30 p.m., finally ending by rain. This has been the Cornelius houghtelin Farm Part 3 on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Cornelius houghtelin Farm Part 4, and we're going to take a look here at the barn. As I mentioned in video number 1, this barn was built in 1820, making it one of the older existing barns here in Adams County and in Gettysburg. And we're going to take a look at the inside of this barn. It's a very beautiful barn, has most of its original wood still intact. And as we walk in here, you can see it is a non-heated barn with slatted wood and beam floors. It's still today operated and used as a farm. And just behind the barn, you can actually see the farm animals out here that come right up to it. This is a barn also on July 3rd and 4th of 1863, and for a few days after the battle was also used as a field hospital for the wounded Union soldiers that made the attack here on July 3rd, and they were brought back. They brought back their wounded here to this barn, and this barn was used as a temporary aid station and field hospital until those soldiers could be transferred to Camp Letterman out on the York Road. This has been the Cornelius houghtelin Farm, the barn which was used as a field hospital, built in 1820 on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Be the Cornelius houghtelin Farm Part 5 here on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook, and we're going to begin to take a look inside this beautiful house here as we stand here in the dining room today. So if you stay here, this is where you'll have your breakfast at, and here it is at Christmas time. They got the tree all up and decorated. The first room we're going to take a look at is Riley's North Carolina Battery Room. Now, we talked about the actions of Riley's Battery on a previous video, and as we walk into this room, and this is one of the suites in the room, we'll go over Riley's action in the battle again. On July 3rd, Riley's guns were detached, and they first occupied a position about 300 yards west of where they sit today on West Confederate Avenue. They were right along the Emmitsburg Road. These guns were hotly engaged with the artillery of the Union Cavalry Division that was heading northbound on the Emmitsburg Road. Now, when the cavalry under General Elon Farnsworth charged into the valley of the Plum Run, they were placed where they are today, and you can go back and watch our video on Riley's Battery. But when Farnsworth's charge went into Plum Run, the guns were moved 300 yards to the east and put where they are today. We're going to talk a little bit about this room now. If you stay here, and you're fortunate enough to stay here in the Riley, North Carolina Battery Room, it is a very nice looking room. And as you notice here on the wall, there's two doors, 1, 2, and then the wall is stone. That is because this is the original front of the 1809 house. And this was Cornelius and Anna Houghtalin's front doors. Now, when we say front doors, as to front door, there is a reason for that. Originally, when homes were built in the Victorian era, they usually had two front doors that went into the parlor. And the reason for that is when a family member would pass away, we didn't have funeral homes and such as we do today. The funerals were held in their homes. And of course, when Cornelius houghtelin died, upstairs above us on April the 9th, 1865. His body was brought downstairs and placed into the parlor, which was the room that you walked into on the front door. And as visitors would come here to view his body, they would go in the store, view the casket, and then come back out the front door. And that's just how things were done here during the Victorian era. Again, today, this room is used as one of the suites, the Riley's North Carolina Battery Suite. And two things, if you stay here, is that you'll notice that involves Riley's North Carolina Battery. One of them is this Dale Gallen painting here. This is Riley's Battery on July 3rd, 1863 on the South Cavalry Battlefield by Dale Gallen. It's an excellent painting, and if you'd like a copy of this painting, you can go to Dale Gallen's gallery right here in town and purchase a print. And then just outside, back in the dining area that we started of, and this is one of those little secrets of the battlefield, a shell that was fired by Riley's North Carolina Battery on July 3rd, 1863, landed in the property of the Cornelious houghtelin farm, and it was dug out. And that's it right here. That's a shell from Riley's North Carolina Battery. And it's in this case here for everyone that visits and stays here to see. So this has been the Cornelious houghtelin Farm, Part 5, Riley's North Carolina Battery Room, here on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook.